When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. They ghosted you out of nowhere? Listen closely, my friends. That wasn't by accident. That was their exit strategy. Their silence wasn't confusion, it was clarity in disguise. The moment they vanished, without warning, without closure, they told you everything you needed to know, not with words, but with absence. And I promise you this, that absence speaks louder than any apology they'll never have the courage to give. Hey folks, imagine this for a second. You're driving through thick fog. You can barely see, but you're following someone's taillights ahead. You trust they know the road. Then, out of nowhere, the lights disappear. No warning, no detour signs, just gone. You slam the brakes, heart racing, and sit there wondering, did they crash? Did they take a turn I missed? Did I do something wrong? But the truth is, they were never guiding you in the first place. They were just passing through. And the second the path got uncomfortable or unclear, they took an exit you couldn't see, because they never intended to finish the ride with you. That's what ghosting is. It's emotional cowardice wrapped in digital silence. It's disappearing instead of confronting. And if you're blaming yourself for it, stop. People don't ghost because you're hard to love. They ghost because they lack the maturity to handle real connection. They ghost because your presence required a depth they weren't ready to swim in. You didn't lose them. They lost their mask the moment they couldn't pretend anymore. You see, some folks only show up for the sunshine. They love the laughter, the attention, the easy days. But the second it gets cloudy, the moment you ask for effort, respect, clarity, poof, they vanish like a magician's trick. Only this isn't magic, this is manipulation. This is avoidance dressed up as moving on. And the lie they leave you with? That you did something wrong, that you weren't enough. My friends, that's the biggest lie of all. Let's break that right now. You were never too much for the right person. You were simply too real for someone who was pretending. The Stoics taught us we suffer more in imagination than in reality. And that's what ghosting tries to do. It feeds your imagination with doubts, fears, and unfinished stories. But today, we cut the script. We take the silence, and we give it meaning. Because when they disappear, that's not your ending. That's your awakening. So, what now? You stop chasing shadows. You stop writing paragraphs to someone who left you on scene. You stop rehearsing closure for someone who didn't even give you a goodbye. Instead, you rise. You reclaim your voice. You hold your head high and understand. Their absence wasn't rejection. It was redirection. It was the universe saying, don't wait at a door that was never meant to open again. And you're not broken. You're becoming stronger, clearer, untouchable. And the best part, you don't have to beg, prove, or perform. Just be. Be silent, be powerful, be whole. Write it in the comments right now. I choose peace. Let it be your affirmation. Let it be your declaration that you're no longer haunted by those who ghosted you. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're ready to heal, and stay with me. Because what's coming next will change the way you see every person who ever disappeared without a word. Number 1, they wanted the last word without saying a word. Silence is one of the great arts of conversation. Let's not sugarcoat it, my friends. When someone ghosts you, when they vanish into thin air with no explanation, no goodbye, no closure, it feels like the loudest silence in the world. It's like being left in a theater after the lights go out, wondering if the show is over or if everyone just left you behind. You're sitting there in the dark, waiting for a curtain that never drops. And you start asking yourself the most dangerous question of all. Was it something I did? Now here's the lie, that this silence is accidental, that maybe they forgot, maybe they got busy, maybe they'll come back once they figure things out. Let's rip that illusion apart right now. When someone disappears from your life without warning, they're not confused. They're calculated. Ghosting is not forgetting to reply to a message. It's not just needing space. It's control disguised as confusion. It's their way of getting the last word without ever speaking. Imagine this, a courtroom, but you're the only one who showed up. The judge? Gone? The lawyer? Missing? The other party? Nowhere to be seen. You prepared your truth. You brought your questions. You rehearsed your closing statement, but they skipped the trial. They left you holding the weight of every question with no one to answer it. And here's the thing, they wanted it that way because silence, it gives them power. It leaves you wondering. And when you're wondering, you're not healing, you're looping. Ghosting creates a wound with no clear scar. You don't know where to place the pain, so you place it on yourself. What did I miss? Was I too much? Did I push them away? But here's the truth that will set your mind free. Their silence isn't about your worth. It's about their inability to handle honesty. People ghost when they don't have the courage to face confrontation. They ghost when they want to leave a mark without being held accountable. They ghost when they want to exit without having to explain. And if you're wondering why that's so hard to accept, it's because your mind craves closure like lungs crave air. The brain is a meaning-making machine. It wants reasons, stories, endings. So when someone ghosts you, your mind doesn't know how to file it. It keeps reopening the case, hoping new evidence will appear. But my friends, sometimes the silence is the answer. Sometimes no closure is the closure. Sometimes the way they left is proof of why they didn't deserve to stay. The Stoics taught us, you cannot control the actions of others, only your response to them. You couldn't stop them from ghosting you, but you can choose what that silence means to you. Will you let it define your worth, or will you let it define their weakness? When someone ghosts you, they think they've ended the story on their terms. But they didn't end anything. They just removed themselves from a chapter they were never meant to finish. The pen is still in your hand. The silence they left behind. That's space for your narrative now. Space to grow. Space to reclaim. Space to rise. So how do you respond to someone who wanted the last word without saying a word? You don't react. You don't chase. You don't shrink. You rise in the stillness. You let your silence speak louder than their escape, and you rebuild so powerfully, so peacefully, that they realize the only thing they truly ghosted was their own growth. Write this in the comments right now. I rise from silence. Show them. Show yourself. Show the world that their ghosting didn't break you. It built the version of you that no one gets to abandon again. And stay with me, because what's coming next will change the way you see every unanswered message, every faded connection, and every person who thought your silence meant defeat. Number 2, ghosting is emotional cowardice disguised as closure. The truth does not change according to our ability to stomach it. Let's call it for what it is, my friends. Ghosting isn't some misunderstood accident. It's not about someone being too busy, too overwhelmed, or too emotionally tangled to reply. It's not they forgot, and it's not they're still figuring themselves out. No, ghosting is emotional cowardice wearing a cloak of closure. It's the quietest form of disrespect, and the most confusing, because instead of slamming the door, they just vanish, leaving it open enough for your hope to keep checking if they might walk back through it. Imagine inviting someone into your home. You show them every room, open every door, even give them a key. And one day, without warning, they leave. No note, no explanation, just gone. But they didn't take the key. They left it on the table so your mind could keep wondering, are they coming back? Did I do something? Should I lock the door? Should I wait by it? you pace, you overthink, but they're not coming back. Not because they forgot the way, but because they never intended to say goodbye in the first place. Ghosting isn't an absence of love. It's an absence of courage. It's the inability to say, "I don't want this anymore," so they let time do their dirty work. They hope the silence says what they're too spineless to put into words. And because they vanish without confrontation, they get to feel like they exited gracefully. But folks, that's not grace. That's fear. That's someone so emotionally underdeveloped, they'd rather abandon a connection than own their discomfort. And the worst part, it makes you question your worth. Was I not lovable enough? Did I scare them off? Did I open up too fast? And that's where the real damage begins. Not in their exit, but in the storm it stirs in your mind. You replay every conversation, every laugh, every moment you let them in. You look for clues, try to spot the moment it shifted, but you won't find it. Because the ghoster never left clues. They left control. They left confusion. That's what ghosting really is. Control through unanswered questions. But here's what the Stoics would tell you. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And that truth cuts through the noise like a blade. You don't get to choose who ghosts you, but you do get to choose what you do with that silence. You can either build a prison out of it, or use it as the foundation for your freedom. Now, I know why this is hard. You were expecting closure, a conversation, some level of respect. But not everyone who smiles at you has the spine to speak honestly. And that's not your flaw, it's theirs. They ghosted not because you were too much, but because they were too little. Too little to handle discomfort. Too little to own up to their change of heart. Too little to stand in front of you and speak the truth with clarity. My friends, closure isn't something you wait for, it's something you create. You don't need their words to understand their silence. You don't need a goodbye to heal. You don't need answers from someone who refused to give you basic human decency. What you need is your own permission to move forward. Your own reminder that someone else's inability to show up doesn't mean you weren't worth showing up for. So how do you heal from this? First, drop the fantasy that they'll come back with an explanation that will make everything make sense. They won't. And even if they did, it still wouldn't be enough. Second, stop waiting. Every day you wait for a ghost to return is a day you hand over your peace. And third, rise. Not in spite of what happened, but because of it. Let it make you clearer, stronger, more discerning. Because next time someone disappears without a word, you won't beg, you won't break, you'll breathe. And you'll say, "Thank you for revealing yourself without me having to ask." Let that be your strength. Write it in the comments right now. I give myself closure. Let it echo. Let it live. Show them you didn't need a goodbye to rebuild. You needed the truth, and their silence gave it to you. Stay with me, because in the next part, we'll uncover what ghosting really reveals about your light, and why some people simply aren't built to stand in it. Number 3, they couldn't face the reflection you held up. People don't abandon people they love. They abandon people they were using. Here's something they don't tell you about ghosting, my friends. Sometimes it's not about rejection at all. Sometimes it's about reflection. You didn't scare them away by being too much. You scared them by being too real, too honest, too awake. You see, ghosting often has less to do with who you are, and everything to do with what you represent. You became a mirror they weren't ready to look into. Imagine standing in front of a mirror that doesn't flatter you. No filters, no soft lighting, just the raw, unedited truth. Most people say they want authenticity, but when that reflection shows them the parts they've been avoiding, they flinch, they turn away. They shut the lights off and walk out of the room like the mirror was the problem. But it wasn't the mirror. It was the truth it showed them. And that's what you were to them. Not a storm, not a mistake, but a mirror. You reflected something in them they didn't want to face. Maybe you challenged them to grow. Maybe your presence exposed their laziness, their inconsistency, their emotional immaturity. Maybe you were the first person who didn't tolerate their games, who stood firm in your standards. And suddenly, they weren't looking at a partner or a friend. They were looking at a version of themselves they weren't proud of. So instead of leveling up, they bailed out. This is where it gets twisted. They'll make you feel like the problem. Their silence forces you into overthinking. You'll wonder if you were too demanding, too serious, too intense. You'll replay conversations looking for the one sentence that sent them running. But my friends, the trigger wasn't your words. It was your clarity. It was your energy that asked for truth when they were comfortable with surface. It was your growth that exposed their stagnation. And the sad truth is, not everyone has the strength to face someone who challenges them to become better. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." That's what growth feels like: uncomfortable, humbling, raw. But people who avoid growth avoid anyone who represents it. So they ghost, not to hurt you, but to escape themselves. And I know what you might be thinking. If they felt all this, why didn't they just say something? Why not be honest? Because honesty requires accountability, and to admit that you made them feel inadequate would mean they'd have to own their shortcomings. It's easier to vanish than to say, "You made me realize I'm not where I want to be, and I don't have the courage to rise to your level." They didn't leave because you were wrong. They left because you were right. You forced them to feel something real, and real is terrifying to people still hiding behind masks. This is where Stoic wisdom becomes your anchor. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good person should be. Be one." That's what you did. You showed up. You stood tall in truth. And that's why it hurts. Because you expected them to meet you there. But not everyone will. Some will choose the comfort of their echo chambers over the challenge of your presence. So what do you do when someone ghosts you because your light was too bright? You don't dim it. You don't apologize. You don't soften yourself to fit inside their shadows. You rise brighter. You reflect sharper. You become even more of what scared them. Because what scared them is what will attract the right ones. The ones meant for you will never flinch at your clarity. They won't run from the truth. They'll embrace it. They'll stand in it with you. They'll match your depth instead of ghosting it. Write it in the comments right now. I won't dim my light. Say it with your chest. Let the world know that ghosting won't convince you to shrink. That silence won't make you doubt your glow. Stay with me, because next, we're going even deeper into what ghosting accidentally reveals about who they really are, and what it says about who you're becoming. Number 4, you broke the role they cast you in. They loved the version of you they could control, the real you. That's when they disappeared. Let's get brutally honest, folks. Not everyone was drawn to you for who you truly are. Some were drawn to the version of you that served their story. The easygoing you, the agreeable you, the always available, always understanding, bend over backwards to keep the peace version. But the second you started evolving, the second you stopped playing by the rules they quietly wrote for you, poof, gone. No explanation, no accountability. Just silence. You didn't do anything wrong. You just stopped being the character in their play and started becoming the main character in your own life. Let me paint you a metaphor, my friends. Imagine you're an actor in a play you didn't write. You're handed a script. You're expected to say your lines, smile at the right moments, and never, ever change the scene. And for a while you play along. It's easier. It keeps the peace. You stay predictable, palatable, contained. But then something shifts. One day, you decide to ad-lib. You speak your truth. You start asking real questions. You stop pretending. And suddenly, you're a threat to the whole production. The director, aka the person who benefits from the script, can't handle it. So instead of adjusting the story, they cut you out of it. That's ghosting. That's what happens when you stop conforming to the role they cast you in. They didn't leave because you became difficult. They left because you became different. You started showing strength where they expected submission. You started setting boundaries instead of bending over. You started saying no when they were used to hearing sure, and their fragile sense of control. It shattered. People like that don't want connection. They want control disguised as connection. And I know, it's painful. It's confusing. Because you start questioning, was it me? Did I change too much? Should I have just stayed quiet? No, my friends. You changed exactly the way you needed to. You outgrew the role they were comfortable with. And instead of rising with you, they retreated. Because they weren't in love with you. They were in love with the version of you that made them feel comfortable. Epictetus once said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." And here's the Stoic truth you need to hold on to. The people who ghost you when you step into your power, they were never committed to your freedom. They were committed to your obedience. They liked you small, silent, predictable. But the moment you stopped people-pleasing, the moment you started prioritizing your own peace, growth, and dignity, you became incompatible with their illusion. And they vanished. Not because you scared them, but because you exposed them. They had no idea how to relate to someone who wasn't begging for crumbs anymore. Let that be your awakening, not your wound. And yeah, I get it. It's tempting to blame yourself, to wonder if dialing it back would have kept them around. But here's your answer. You were never meant to stay inside a box just to make someone else comfortable. You were meant to grow, to stretch, to evolve. And anyone who can't handle that, they're not rejecting you. They're removing themselves from a space that now demands authenticity, and they're not ready for that. So what do you do now? You don't shrink. You don't rewrite yourself to fit a past version they once approved of. You keep rising. You keep speaking up. You keep showing up as the real you. Because the ones who belong in your life won't need you to play a role. They'll want you, fully, fearlessly, and unscripted. Write this in the comments right now. I refuse to shrink. Say it out loud if you have to. Let it be your rebellion against every person who tried to mold you into something you're not. Let it be your reminder that ghosting isn't your failure. It's proof you broke free from a role you were never meant to play. Stay with me, my friends, because in the next part, we're diving into a painful but powerful truth. How their silence is actually a confession, and why it says more about them than it ever will about you. Number 5. Their silence is a confession without words. What you allow is what will continue, and what they run from is what they can't control. You know, folks, there's a funny thing about silence. People think it's nothing, but silence, real silence, is never empty. It speaks, it confesses, it reveals. Sometimes it even screams the truth louder than words ever could. When someone ghosts you, they think they've dodged the conversation. But what they don't realize is, they've just made their confession without ever opening their mouth. Let's be real. When someone you cared about suddenly cuts the lights and disappears, your mind goes into overdrive. Did I do too much? Did I say something wrong? Should I have held back? You start combing through every moment like a detective at a crime scene. But what if I told you this? You're not looking for answers. You already have them, because silence is an answer. Ghosting is a message. You just have to be bold enough to decode it. Imagine someone walking away from you, but instead of turning their back with an apology or an explanation, they just fade into fog. And as they vanish, they drop something behind, a letter you never asked for, but needed to see. That letter doesn't say, "I'm sorry." It doesn't say, "You deserved better." What it says is this: "I was never strong enough to stand in the same light you did." That's what ghosting really is. A confession of weakness, of fear, of emotional immaturity. It's someone saying, "I couldn't handle what you triggered in me, so I left before you saw all of me, the real, insecure, unhealed me." And this is where the lie breaks, my friends. The lie that their silence means you're not worthy, that you're forgettable, that you were easy to walk away from. No, that silence wasn't about you. It was about them not being able to handle the reflection you held up. It was about them realizing they couldn't manipulate you, impress you, or hide behind charm anymore. And when people can't control the narrative, they often try to control the exit. But Stoic wisdom reminds us, attach yourself to what is true, not to what retreats from truth. That's the key. When someone ghosts you, don't chase the shadow, chase the truth. And here's the truth: they disappeared because your presence demanded honesty they weren't ready to give. You didn't lose something valuable, you revealed something shallow. And I know what you're feeling right now. But they were so consistent in the beginning. They made plans, they smiled, they called. Yeah, they did. But people always show you their best when they want something: attention, validation, comfort. The real test: it's how they act when things get real, when emotions surface, when truths are spoken. And ghosting is what happens when someone fails that test. Their silence wasn't random. It was a response to the pressure of your presence. You didn't scare them. You stripped their mask. And that mask couldn't survive in a room where authenticity lives. So what do you do when someone's silence is their confession? You accept it. You stop rewriting the story in your head. You stop making excuses for their behavior. You stop hoping they'll come back with a well-constructed apology and a heart full of clarity. Because here's the truth: if they had the emotional capacity to ghost you, they likely don't have the emotional depth to fix it. Let their silence be the loudest truth you've ever heard, and let it free you, not trap you. Marcus Aurelius said, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know the truth about you." You know who you are. You know what you brought to the table. You know what you deserve. Let that be your peace. So, write this in the comments right now. Their silence spoke. I listened. Let the world know you're done chasing noise that's not meant for your ears, that you're not haunted by what wasn't said. You're empowered by what you understood. And there it is, my friends. The truth behind the silence they left you with. What looked like ghosting was never random. It was a reflection of their inability to face what you triggered in them. Your truth, your strength, your growth. But instead of chasing what disappeared, you're rising. You're not haunted by their absence. You're empowered by your clarity. And that's where the real healing begins. Remember, you were never abandoned. You were redirected. If this message hit home, if you felt seen, understood, or even just a little stronger, then show it. Hit that like button, subscribe for more soul-shaking truths, and share this with someone who needs to hear it.